Hello, this is Mind of a Man podcast. Today we have a special episode in English because I have a friend of mine from Denmark visiting me, Ole Bjerg. So, Ole, welcome to Mind of a Man podcast.
Thank you very much. And maybe I should add that this is also a special episode on my podcast, De Nye Penge. So also welcome to my listeners.
Can you tell us who are you and what you do?
I'm a man, as you can see. There was this thing going around Twitter. I think there's a guy called Peter Sweden, and so he made these bullets where he said, "I'm straight male, I'm white, I'm Christian, I'm not vaccinated, the Ukraine war is bullshit," something like that. And he just listed all of those, and I was quite inspired by that. So when you ask me that question, that's I'm tempted to kind of list all those things. So I used to be a professor at the Copenhagen Business School, but I was fired because we didn't agree on the Corona policies, at least how to implement them. So they kicked me out. So now I'm a free intellectual, as you can say. And my interests are money. I've been writing books about money. I'm also doing family constellation, and then I'm a Christian. I belong to a church in northern uh, Denmark, a free church, I could say. It's a very, it's our, or the kind of, the Jesus I know is one who wants us to be free. So I like that very much. Um, yeah, I guess that kind of. Then I have two sons, and I'm easing into becoming a farmer. As when I was fired, I also moved out into the countryside. So now I have I would in in modern terms it's probably not a farm, but in my world it's a farm. There's like 2 acres of land. So I'm a landowner also, but it's a new thing to me. So yeah, trying to get used to that. And then I'm your friend. So yeah, I guess that kind of covers it.
And you also do family constellation work?
I do, yeah, yeah.
And maybe I will tell the listeners that how we met. So we first met in European Men's Gathering in Denmark, which is a gathering for men who are interested on self-development and kind of trying to find a way to be a man in this world where it's a big question of how to be a man.
Hmm.
And we met there, and then we shared our interest on family constellation work, and through a couple interesting accidents, we started doing family constellation work together, and we did it like 1 or 2 years, almost weekly. We met online, studied how to be we both are we studied how to be a facilitator, and now we both are facilitators, and that brings us together
Hmm.
today.
Hmm.
And also today we have top topics that we want to talk about. They are money and love. So can you first tell us a little bit about your background on money? That uh, you have written books about money, but for people who don't know you, like, can you give us something so they can kind of uh, easy into this conversation?
So I I have a my academic background is I'm trained as a sociologist, and so I've worked as a sociologist and philosopher. And so my approach to money was slightly different from where you would come from in economics. So I would kind of start from basic questions like, what is money? Where does money come from? Um, and this was right after the last financial crisis, the one in 2007. I started looking into this question, and I kind of looked into how banks work and how banks create money. This was a new thing to me, and at the time it was also new. Like, there weren't many people talking about it. Now it's become more mainstream, but at the time I was like, wow, banks create money. And that was a surprise to me. I kind of thought that money came from somewhere else, from the central bank. So yeah, so that kind of opened up my field of research in money. So I've written several books about money and central banks, and I used to think I also started, together with other people, started an organization called Gode Penge, which means good money. There's a British equivalent called positive money. And at the time, we were actually advocating central bank digital currencies. And those are the kind of money that they are now in the process of implementing. But in the meantime, I've kind of found out that it's going to be crap. So I'm not for that anymore. Uh, I think central bank digital, if you have a good state, a benevolent state, it could be a good thing, but we don't have that. So it's going to be terrible, basically. And then, so there's one side of the study of money, which is kind of how does money work in the economy? How is it tied to banking crisis, asset inflation, unemployment, interest rates, all that kind of stuff, central banks, monetary policy, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of one side of it. But another thing that also interests me is our relationship to money. How, because money is also it's also an existential thing, and it's also a spiritual thing. And I think money signifies, or money is an expression of our interaction with the world. And this is also where money and love comes together. Usually we kind of think money and love are kind of separate things. Like you have money, which you use with strangers and to buy stuff. But if you love someone, if you love your wife or your children, you will give them money maybe, but it's not like you won't buy and sell things. You don't buy and sell things with your wife. That's not how it works, because kind of we tend to think that that's the domain of love, and over here we have the domain of money. But there is a very important or significant sort of equivalence between, or parallel between, money and love, because love essentially is about giving and taking. And money is also an expression of giving and taking. So the way you relate to money, or the way money works in your life, is an expression of the way that you give and take with the world. And that's and giving and taking, we learn that through love. That's also, if you do family constellation, you can often see that people's relationship with money sort of mirrors or is intimately connected to their relationship to their mother. That's because it's through our relationship with our mother that's where we learn how to take and eventually also give. And then that comes out, that's then later expressed in our relationship with money. So
Can you
yeah.
tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe give a short description on family constellation if other people don't know what are we talking about here?
So family constellation it's a method, and then it's also a philosophy or theory. Let me talk about the theory first, the philosophy. Let's see if we come back to the method afterwards. So the basic idea of family constellation is, rather than you don't look at the individual person as like a sort of freestanding subject. You look at the person in the context of his or her family system. And then the family system is it's essentially comprised of your blood relatives, and then there's your spouse is also part of it. Ex-spouses are also part of your family system, and there's also other elements and other people that may be part of it. But basically, it's kind of your blood relatives, and this goes several generations back. So you can have patterns or dynamics which belong or which have originated several generations back, but they will sort of keep repeating themselves through the generations. So maybe there will be some patterns or dynamics in my life that in a way they're not mine in a way, because they kind of belong generations back. But nevertheless, because I'm loyal to my system, because I act out the dynamics in my system, I will sometimes, or I will kind of repeat these patterns. For instance, some people have a pattern of self-sabotaging. Like they will have a job, and then at some point when they then become successful in that job, they do something where they fuck it up, and then they're fired, and then they get a new job, and then they work their way up to some kind of success, and then they fuck it up again, and then they repeat that pattern. You can also see it in relationships, that at some point, some people, they're just going to fuck it up. And if you look at it from like a sort of rational or just a normal perspective, you will think, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? Why would you screw up your own success? Why would anyone want to do that? But it's because we don't just live by our sort of individual ideas about the world. We also live through these system dynamics. So maybe one of my ancestors, maybe this person's unsuccessful, maybe an accident happened to him or something happened to him, and then out of loyalty, and this works sort of unconsciously, out of loyalty to this person whom I may not even know, out of loyalty to this person, I sort of repeat that pattern of self-sabotaging. So that's just one example of one of these system dynamics that may sort of repeat themselves. And then what we do in family constellation, so in normal psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, you more or less you just sit down and talk, and then you come back 2 weeks later, and then you talk some more, and then you talk some more, and then you talk some more, and then maybe it helps, and maybe it just gets worse. But in family constellation, we work differently. We work through a method called constellation, which means that rather than talking about the issue, we make a constellation, and you can do it like, sort of the standard way of doing it is doing it through a group. So you have like a group of, say, 10 people, and then one person has an issue, and then based on what that issue is, you will invite a number of the other people in the group to act as representatives of people or elements of this person's system. And the way that the facilitator works, the one that's in charge of it, that's, of course, there's an element of experience. So you kind of know some of these patterns by experience because you've seen a lot of constellations, but you also work through intuition. So as you open up the constellation, you also open up a field, and then as a facilitator, you can kind of, the way it works for me is that I sit and I talk to the client like in the beginning, and then at some point, like just maybe it's 10 seconds, maybe it's half a minute or something into this conversation, I get an image of where does this constellation need to start? Who do we invite into this constellation? And for instance, so if we wanted to do, if someone had, like just today, I had someone say to me, "Oh, I'm not very good with money." She didn't say much about it, but it was something like, "Oh, I always have to borrow money, and I can whatever." So if this person came to me and said, "I would like a constellation, and I would like to look at my relationship to money, and I would like to have money kind of flow in my life better than they do now," then I would probably say, "Okay, let's pick 2 representatives, one for you and one for money." And then these 2 people will enter into the field, which just means that if you're in the group, you will be sitting in a circle, and then these 2 people will get into the circle. And then the weird thing that happens, or the miraculous thing that happens, or the whatever you like to call it, mysterious thing that happens, is that these 2 people, even though they don't know the client, the representative for the client and the representative for money, they don't know the client, but they don't have to. Sometimes it's an advantage if they don't. And yet, for some reason, they can feel that relationship. So they will be standing in the circle, and then you can see how these two people interact. Do they look at each other? Does one of them look away? You can ask them, how do you feel into this relationship? Is it comfortable, or is it uncomfortable, or whatever? And then based on that, you will add other elements into the constellation. And the idea then is, first you want to see an image of the existing dynamic. You want to see what kind of dynamic or entanglement prevents this person from having the kind of relationship with money that she would like to have. So what's the existing pattern for entanglement? And once we've seen that, you then add in other elements in order to create like a new image or a new movement, away from this pattern. Where you want to disentangle the system in order to create flow in this person's life and in her relationship to money.
So you were talking about that there's a field.
Yeah.
So what's that field then?
Yeah. That's I think I would call it a heart field. So we are used to thinking that our brains, we used to think, or we are used to thinking that it is our brain that does the thinking for us. And we're used to thinking that the brain is the smartest part of our body. And it is true that the brain is good for some things, but I think there's a potential in our hearts that we're only beginning to realize. And so our hearts can do stuff that our brains cannot do. And so my experience is what happens when you open up this field. And when I say open up this field, it's not like you say a spell, or I don't know. I can't explain what it is that kind of opens a field, but it just opens up. And then what happens is that the people who enter into the field, it's like their hearts are activated. And then their hearts, they can kind of tap into each other. So, of course, if we have one client who's getting a constellation, it's her field that is opened up. And then the representatives that come in, they can kind of tap into her field. Even though they don't know her, they kind of tap into her. I like to think, like, in these times that we live in now, I think we're kind of, I have the sense that we're moving into something new. There's different words for this, but we're moving into something new. And my experience is also in this process, there's like two versions of the new. There's an artificial version, and then there's an organic version of it. And in this case, I would say one thing that's happening right now is there's these efforts to turn us into cyborgs, and they want to put all kinds of technology into us, and maybe even some Bluetooth stuff, so that we can sort of interact with each other through Bluetooth. And that, to me, that's like the artificial version of it. But the organic version is that we open up our hearts, so that just like if we were like connected to Bluetooth, I could sort of tap into your hard disk and your memory and all this in an artificial way. But I could also do it with my heart. I don't need this Bluetooth bullshit. I can just open up my heart, and then I can tap into what's in you. So we have these connections. We're sort of connected on a deeper level than we're used to thinking. And I think that's what family constellations open up to.
Do you see there's a danger for like flirting too much with the new age elements? Because at least in Finland, it's like family constellation is it's in a field of New Age, which it's not official. It doesn't have any nobody backs it up. It's kind of like you will have just family constellations, and somebody will go there if they want, and it's self-development. And what's my experience that if you are in the self-development field, it's like a wild west. It filled with everything, and you can say just whatever. There are chakras and energies all flying around, and what you were describing for me is like I feel that we need to have some more grounded description for family constellation. What's happening there? In that sense that because it's so easy to get lost in the New Age mumbo jumbo. And if you have ever tried family constellation, it's not New Age thing. It's so you can feel it, like you can feel it in your heart. You can feel the emotions. You can feel what happens there. So can you see a danger there?
Life is dangerous. And what you're saying now, it reminds me of another one of my interests, which is cryptocurrencies. That's also what bankers say about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. They say, oh, it's dangerous. Nobody's backing it up. And of course, what the bankers mean is that, oh, we don't have the government backing this money, just like the government is backing the bank money. So kind of what happens in the monetary world is that governments have some sort of monopoly on not the creation of money, but the authorization of what counts as money in a society. And then they decided to give that privilege or that authorization to private banks. So private banks create money. Now then we have a new player on the market, or Bitcoin, right? Which is just sort of fed into the world, like created by this Satoshi Nakamoto, and then he created the blockchain and he created Bitcoin. And it's out there and it's not backed by anything. And then, of course, yes, you can get lost in this. You can lose your keys to your Bitcoin, or you can invest in like a shit coin, like some call it bogus coin, Dogecoin or whatever, and then you can lose your money. Yes, you can do that. But to me, that's life. And I trust people. I trust that this is also something we're learning right now, that we, each and every one of us, we are the best judges of what is best in our world. We don't need the government to do that. In fact, what we're seeing now is that the worst judge of what's best in my life turns out to be the government. They make these catastrophic judgments about what's best for me. Like for instance, so we're saying, so family constellation is not, it's not authorized. It's not something you can't get the government to pay for you to go to family constellation. What can you get the government to pay for? Well, you can get the government to pay for you to go to a doctor, and then he will give you these crappy pills that is probably not going to help you, but they have all kinds of side effects, and they'll make you ill. And it's the same with money. What kind of money does the government want you to use? Yeah, they want you to use currencies that they are now in the process of destroying through quantitative easing. I know I'm rambling here about all kinds of stuff, but it comes back to, I'd rather have people getting lost in New Age and then doing their own experiences, trying something that doesn't work, and then feeling, oh, this doesn't work, I'll try something else. I'd much rather have that than have them just, I'm ill, I will go to the authorized doctor and he will take care of my body and my soul and all that. I'd much rather have the other thing. And
maybe I will give you a couple of my ideas on family constellation and how to explain it. And for me, what family constellation philosophy lacks is understanding on Jungian theories. And there's just one theory that kind of, for me, bridges one big gap here, and it's like understanding what is collective unconscious. is, and basic Jungian idea is that we share part of our consciousness together. It's shared. We are like corks on top of a big sea, that our like ego and consciousness is top of the water, and we are here conscious beings, but under the water we are connected, and we are sharing lots of things that in family constellation, let's see, when we do the work, we all have a mother. And Jung would call, we have a mother archetype, because it's the basic rule that all living organisms have this mother, and it's not that different that you have a mom and I have a mom. I was breastfed or I was cared for or not, and you were. And we can tap into that experience. And Jung would say that, well, if Jung would do family constellation, he would say that we are tapping into these archetypal patterns that we all share, which are living in our unconscious. And what are we doing in family constellation work? We are becoming conscious of these patterns that are in our family systems. And so the problem with Jung is that he was too individualistic, and he was thinking about my individuation process and going inside and understanding my relationship to other people. And what Hellinger brought to the table is that it's just not you, it's just your family system which is working here at the same time. And if you can add this, it's, for me, it's like really easy to understand family constellation. Oh, we are just tapping into these collective patterns, and then we are releasing those entanglements and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with your explanation. I'm not sure it kind of solves the problem that you're looking for, because I used to, I'm educated at the university, and I remember when I was studying sociology, we had one class where he was also talking about different psychologists, and he was talking about Freud. And then I remember the teacher saying, there's also this guy Jung, and he didn't say anything about it other than don't read him. and the reason is that Jung himself he's not part of the, he's not recognized by the government either.
Yeah, that's
so you're just making reference to someone who's also not recognized.
There's two problems at the table, right?
Yeah. And I think so. Some explanations work for some people, other explanations work for other people. And of course, yes, if you already know Jung, then you can make that reference. I want to quote one of my. I don't have many favorite philosophers left, but I do have some love for Wittgenstein. And Wittgenstein, he said, I'll say it in German, and I'll say it in English. He said, es gibt allerdings Unaussprechliches. Dies zeigt sich, es ist das Mystische. And what this means is that he says this is part of he sort of laid out this program for language philosophy, like very strict logical language. But then he said there's some things that this language cannot grasp. There are some things that you can't express in language. And then he says they show themselves. This zeigt sich. It is the mystical. And I think there's no way around it. Like, there's no way around it. There is a mystical element, which means that you can't, there's no way of understanding family constellation other than experiencing it. It's the same way as sex. You can you can watch 100 porno movies and you won't understand sex. You can kind of, oh yeah, it's something with a penis that goes into the vagina, something like that. You can get that, but it's only when you do it with a person you love, then you understand it. So, and I think it's the same with family constellation. You can't understand it unless you do it and experience this yourself.
So what did you experience in family constellation that made you fall in love with the method? You personally?
It was the lack of words. I remember because like I've lived half my life at the university, and it's been good, a lot of good things, but there's so many words there, and a lot of them don't mean anything. So what I found in family constellation is that on the one hand, I could see that we were working with some of the themes that you find in philosophy. In fact, like philosophy, philo means love, and Sophia, Sophie is something about wisdom and knowledge. So philosophy is actually knowledge about love. And that's what you do in family constellation. It's a study of love, the way love flows through a family system. So I kind of found, I saw there a way of working with it and investigating it without using all these words that don't mean anything. And at the same time, it's a very bodily experience. You're taking knowledge through your heart and through your body. Both when you have your own constellation, you can kind of feel what's going on. But also when you act as a representative in other people's constellations, you sense their system, or you sense basic elements of love. You sense that in your own bodies. So that was the first thing, was this very sort of immediate experience of things. It was like a bodily way of doing research in a way.
What kind of changes could you notice in yourself when you started doing this, like in practical world, in your relationship with other people and the relationship towards yourself?
So much. Like, I remember one of the first things that came up was my relationship to the mother of my oldest son. We haven't been together. We weren't together at the time, and we hadn't been together for several years. And there was a lot of tension. There had been a lot of tension in that relationship. And gradually I could just feel that tension. Or I would say gradually, not even gradually, like suddenly, and then gradually, I could sense that tension being released. And this was an experience in me, but it was also, even though she didn't go to family constellation, I don't think she even knew that I was doing it, not at the time, but our relationship changed, which is also weird. How is that even possible? But it is possible. So that's the first thing, was the sense of, like, like if you have a Windows, I don't like Windows computers. I don't like Bill Gates. And I don't like Windows computers. I have Linux on my computer. But if you have Windows on your computer, you will experience that over time, your computer just gets slower and slower. And it's because there are some programs in the computer that are just running, and they're taking up some of the energy and the capacity of the processor. But they're not doing anything. They're just like, I don't know what they do. I think purpose is for you to buy a new computer at some point. So, but anyway, but they're just like sucking up energy from the system, right? And it's the same when you have an entanglement in your family system. You have a program or something that's kind of running without doing anything really, but it's just running there. And it's sucking out energy from your life. And my experience was that some of these programs that had been sort of just running down it, they were just shut down. And then that energy was kind of released or freed, and I could use it for other things. Did that answer the question?
Yes, you answered the question really well, and it reminded me of my experience with family constellation, and I would describe it, the first love for family constellation, that what I experienced, where the first love came, was that I was reading a blog post from my friend, and she went through this family constellation weekend, and she was talking about this intergenerational patterns of shame in the family because of what had ever happened to her family. And when I was reading the blog post, I had this sense inside myself that I had exactly the same experience. I didn't have the words for the experience, but I could kind of say like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I feel." And from for there, I booked a place for family constellation weekend. And what happened to me was I felt that I just got space in my heart. That there was some like it was an entanglement or this kind of like a pushing sense of that something was pushing my heart together. And there was lots of things that happened there. I don't go there, but what I felt afterwards, I felt this release that there was room for my heart, that I wasn't so anxious anymore. And after that, it was like I need more of this. This is so amazing. And of course, it's like when you do family constellation work, it's like you do whatever you do. It's like gradual process. You are peeling off the layers of the onion slowly, and then you can uh, find new stuff when you go through this. And it's several years of learning if you want to be a facilitator. And maybe I want to ask you about that because you wanted to be a facilitator. Was it for your own personal development, or did you want to do it for to other people as well, or what was the impulse there to do?
Like in the beginning, I didn't really know what it was, but I had this intuition that this is something I need to learn. And I wasn't sure at the time. I was teaching at the university, and I had a sense that I could use this in my teaching. Like it's another way of working with people and working with philosophy. So, so there was one side of it, but another thing was also that I could feel it was doing good things for me. And then so both of my parents are teachers, and yeah, I've gone to school all my life. When I stopped going to school, I became a teacher myself. So I am a teacher. That's kind of something I've been given through my family system. And so when I learn something new, I quite quickly or have an urge to want to pass it on to other people. So I think that was also part of me wanting to learn this, not just be a recipient of family constellation, but also learn it in a way where I could pass it on to other people, give it to other people.
Okay, so now we delve a little bit deeper in the family constellation. And in the start, you were talking about money and relationship to your mother. Can you a little bit open up the philosophy behind that? Why is it so? What can we learn about it, and how we can make more money?
Yes, I will say first of all, you asked kind of what had changed in me, and another thing that's several things I could name 15 things, but one thing that's also changed is my own relationship with money. I have I wouldn't say it's not like my relationship with money has been sort of overly problematic previously, but now I just feel this. I have this sense of abundance in my life. I have the experience that money comes to me when I need it. So don't worry about money. And I'm also much more at ease in spending money. And that's also one of the things you want to, in order to have balance or harmony in your system, there has to be there's some certain rules that needs to be, there's a certain order that needs to be respected. And one of them is a balance between giving and taking. And you have to also have that in your own life. And some people think, I also meet that among Christians. They're like, oh, it's all about giving, giving to the poor, and we should give and give and give. And that's also true. But what you discover in family constellation is that the hard part isn't giving. The hard part is taking. We don't think that. That's not what they tell us. But that's what it is. And that's because when you take something from another person, when you receive something, you're in the position of child to the parent, because parents give to children, children take from their parents. And when I receive something, when I take something from you, I'm also saying I'm not complete. I don't have everything. I need something. I need something that you have, and now you give it to me. So I'm the small one, and you're the big one. And also, and our egos, they don't like that. Our egos like to be the big ones. So many people are like, they like to be the ones that give all the time, because that kind of satisfies their ego, because then they are the big ones. And so this giving and taking, or taking, is something, the first person, or our first relationship is our relationship with our mother. It starts already in the womb, and then we come out, and then she's the one who feeds us and gives us what we need. So that's like our first, our primary, and our most important relationship at all. Of course, our relationship to God is more important, but it's sort of in family dynamics, this is the most important relationship, is the one to the mother. However, because it's so important, it's also fragile, or it's delicate, so a lot of things can go wrong in a way, and a lot of things do go wrong. Like that, I think that's part of life. No, this relationship, it's bound to, because we're just human. That even our mothers, even though we like to think of them as gods sometimes, or we want them to be gods, but they're not. They're just human beings, so they make mistakes. So things can happen where I, as a child, or I reach out to my mother for something, for food, for love, for whatever it is, and then for some reason she turns away, and then that kind of, and I'm like, oh, I'm this sort of maybe experience in me as a trauma or something like that. And it may, if it is serious or repeatedly, or then it will sit in me where I'd be like, reaching out to my mother and being rejected was so painful that I'll never do it again. I'll never reach out to my mother, and I'll never reach out to anyone, because that will just reactivate this trauma. So it doesn't have to be like you can also have situations where your mother is entangled in her relationships to her mother, for instance. So if your mother is not able to take from her mother, then it may be difficult for her to give to you in an sort of a uncomplicated way. So you may develop a relationship where, rather than your mother just giving to you unconditionally, there will be some sort of, you will experience some form of conditionality where it's like a give and take. Oh, so when I take something from my mother, I am obliged to give something back. It's like as if we're equals. But that's in your relationship. That may be good in your relationship to your spouse, but it's not good in a relationship with your mother, because your mother has given you something that you can never pay off. You can never give it back. She's given you life. So the only thing or what you should do with the thing you've gotten from your mother, is just to say, thank you, mother. I take that with gratitude, and I pass it on. I pass it on into my own life, or I pass it on to my children. And when you do that, you have like the things flow down through the family system.
So basically what you are saying, if you don't have money, you have a mommy issues.
I don't, that's a very, very, that's like Freudian interpretation. The thing about family constellation is that it should never be deductive, in the sense that we should never, I know that's what we're doing now, and in some sense you're right, but we should always, if someone has money issues, we look at them. we do a constellation, you should never assume, you have an issue with money, so you have mother's issue. And it may not be mother issues. I think another, I don't know, this is a hypothesis, but I think sometimes people who have issues with holding on to money, people who just spend it immediately, or they may have an issue with their father. It's just a high, yeah. But anyway, so if someone came to me with a money issue, I would feel into it, and then I would do the constellation without any presuppositions. Of course, I have some experience, and I kind of know. Could be the mother, could be something else. We don't know, but we want to look at it, and it doesn't have to be. I remember doing one constellation with someone, and this was related to his company. He had a company, and so he said he wanted the money to work for him in his company. So what we did was that he picked representatives for himself and for money and for the company. And then we looked at this, and I worked with this, and I could sense, this is also what happens in family constellations, is that you don't necessarily constellate the family. You just constellate something else. Like in this case, it was money and the company. But when I was doing it, I could sense that what money and the company, what they represented was his father and his mother. But I didn't ask him about it, and I didn't even say it to him. We just did the constellation with these two. And the sense I had was that there was something, maybe they had been a divorce. I think they had been a divorce. I didn't ask him, but I think that's my feeling. There had been a divorce, which meant that the two were divorced inside of him. So he couldn't get the two to work together. And so we worked with that, and I gave him some, it's also what you do in family constellations. You give people sentences that they will speak out in this constellation. And then I kind of sort of reunited those two elements in his system, in his heart. And then that would allow the two of them to work together, the money and the company.
What was his experience, or did you say anything that was good for him?
What I did is when we had done this constellation, first I did it with a representative for him, and then two other people, and then at some point I took his representative out and then put the real person in there so he could feel the dynamics. And then once we'd done it, I wanted to check whether this had helped. So I invited him to invite 3 representatives from the audience, from the group, as his customers, because like that's eventually. And then what we have here is, in a way, in family constellations, like sort of pure family constellations, you sometimes have the same dynamic where you have the client working with his mother and his father, and then eventually you take in the client. If the client has children, you put them in there, and then you can see whether the constellation has worked. Because are they at ease, the children? They will be if this has been resolved. So so this was kind of the same dynamic. So I took in the customers of the company, and then I asked them, how did they feel? And then actually, this was a huge group. And then I asked first one, how did he feel? And then the next, how did she feel? And then the third one, I asked him how he felt. And then he was laughing. And then it turned out, I just picked 3 random persons from the group, and there was like 70 of them. And then it turned out he was actually a customer of the company. So he felt really great. So then you know something has happened. And then you just leave it there, and then the client goes back, and then you trust that through mysterious ways, this movement, or this new movement that you've made in the person's system, will kind of disseminate into real life in a way.
Do you think it's possible to fix this problems without doing family constellation. Can you tap into these kind of dynamics inside yourself with other modalities or other techniques?
Yeah, I think we can. I think it would be weird if this was the only way you could do it. But I also do think that there are other forms of therapy or practices that are correct. But I also do think that there are other methods. And I also do think you can also pray. Like you can ask Jesus to fix these things. And I'm like, he can do anything. So, and maybe what sometimes I like Jesus, sometimes what Jesus may do is you will pray and then he'll lead you into doing a family constellation and then that will be fixed. But I do see I see many similarities between Christianity and family constellation, because now I said before that in many Christians, they're kind of all into, oh, it's about giving, 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 which is true, but it's also true that in our relationship to Jesus, we're not giving anything to Jesus. We're just being grateful. So we're taking life from Jesus as it is. And then we're saying, thank you, Jesus. And what we experience is that as we develop this gratitude towards Jesus, he responds with generosity. So the more grateful you are towards Jesus, the more generous he is, the more he will give you, which makes sense. If imagine that you're a parent and you have a small child or a child, in a way you can give the child anything. Like a little child maybe wants some candy, like the child cannot really imagine anything they can't give it. Maybe they want a dinosaur, but anyway, most things you can give to them. So in that sense, you are kind of God in their world. What would make you give them more gratitude? Seeing their, like, oh, thank you, Father. Then that just makes you want to give them even more. And that's exactly how Jesus feels, I think. You should be careful to second guess Jesus. But I think that's kind of the idea, is that the more grateful we are to Jesus, that's my own experience. The more grateful I am to Jesus, the more he just gives me stuff. And then I'll also say my own personal experience is that family constellation has also brought me closer to Jesus, in the sense that some of the things I've learned in family constellation, gratitude, trusting things you don't understand, feeling the spirit work through you in your relationship to others, empathy, and so forth. Those are things that I've learned, maybe not from scratch, but have been cultivated in my family constellation work. And it's the same things that I need in my relationship to Jesus. And then another thing that I've been thinking about recently is also how in the Bible, like, so one of the 10 commandments is, I don't know what the English word is. I don't think the word is respect, but it's like honor. I think it's like honor your father and your mother.
Yeah,
honor your father. I think the formulation is something along the lines of honor your father and your mother to have a long and healthy life, something along those lines. And that's kind of, you see that in the key in family constellation and in life, the key to having a long and healthy life is actually developing gratitude towards your parents, regardless of how they may have raised you. And of course, I mean, I'm a father myself. I make mistakes on a daily basis. So I don't think any parent is perfect. I mean, it doesn't exist. So you should just develop a gratitude towards what you have received from your parents. And many people, this is also like, I think this is a disease which is prevalent in modern psychology, is that in modern psychology, what you need to you need to figure out how your own parents have been total assholes, and then by distancing yourself from your own parents, you then can become a good parent. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. Because what happens if you just think of your own parents as assholes, then you judge them. Then you're bigger than your parents. What that means is then your children, they will then have to be bigger than you, because you're not taking what you need from your parents, and your children, they sense that. So they sense unconsciously, oh, my father doesn't have a mother or a father, so I need to be the father of my father. And that's not a good thing. And nobody wants that. Who wants their children to be to kind of like think that they should solve my problems or give something to me? I just want them to take from you. And in order for that to flow, we need to learn how to take from our parents, regardless of whatever hanks we may have with them. We take from them, and then we can give to our children, and they can just receive unconditionally.
So this is one big problem in family constellation when you say that, because lots of people would now maybe think that my father did this and this and this.
Mhm.
My mother hit me.
Mhm.
My father abandoned me.
Mhm.
How can I honor them? So, but can you talk about that kind of a dynamic that the family constellation philosophy looks at it very differently, like this normal mind, that if somebody does something bad for you, it's just bad, but family constellation has a different layer to that.
Yeah. Mm. First of all, you have the same problem in Christianity. Like, if you look into the world, there's all kinds of bad things going on, like there's pedophilia, there's wars, there's torture, there's all kinds of stuff. And that leads some people to say, oh, if Jesus is in charge of everything, why doesn't he abolish pedophilia? And why doesn't he throw Bill Gates to jail, or whatever it is? And that's a mystery. Or then we need to just submit to say, well, we don't understand that. He works in a mysterious way. He has a bigger plan that we don't know. But the important thing is that you develop a relationship of gratitude and trust in Jesus, and then that's just going to make your life and the world a better place. So the way it works in family constellation is, you can do, in order to, if let's say someone has been grown up in a family of abuse, like there's been alcohol and maybe violence, and so of course this child or this person has all kinds of traumas. So what you will do, what may come out of the constellation is, first of all, you may do a constellation that is multi-generational. So rather than just looking at your father as someone who's abusive, whatever it is, maybe you will put in his father, and then you will see, oh, this is the same pattern. And maybe even the great-grandfather, you will also put him in there. And then, then you can kind of see, okay, so what my father did to me, maybe something even worse happened to him. So rather than, you kind of see your parents not just as your parent, but you see that they were also a child at some point. And sometimes you can then, out of that grows an understanding of, wow, so it was so hard for him, or it was so, but in spite of that, he still provided for me. He still gave me food. He still went to work every day. He still something. So you kind of get an understanding of the reasons for why things are the way they are. So that's one thing. Another thing you can work with is, you can do that with fathers, a little bit more obvious with a mother. You can kind of, instead of focusing on all the things, on all her shortcomings, like, oh, she didn't do this, oh, she abused me, or oh, all kinds of stuff. Then you kind of see, well, she gave me life. She gave me life, and then life has infinite value. So even if you say, okay, so my mother gave me life, but then she abused me, and that's minus 10,000. Then you have infinite minus 10,000. What's that? That's still infinite.
So maybe it is that you have to still first go through that minus 10,000. First, look at the pain.
Yes.
That's kind of the first step in family constellation. You look at what happened, and it's kind of like you cannot go straightly into the taking life. You have to like peel these layers of onions. Okay, this happened. Maybe you can see the patterns from your family tree, how many generations, and then after that you can find out the good things that happened in your family, and discern between those dynamics and find your way to the root. That root is love. That there was love underneath everything, and love is bigger than all of these human dramas. So about the Bible and family constellation, I just read the Bible.
I like the way you said, I just read the Bible.
Yeah. And in 3 years part, I did 2 pages every day. And at the same time, I was studying family constellation philosophy and facilitating. And I didn't see any contradictions there. Basically, it's the family constellation philosophy comes from Christian philosophy. Of course, because Bert Hellinger, the founder of family constellation, was a priest and theologian. Of course, it's like, that's the background. But a couple of things that kind of popped into my mind, from the Bible, what was really family constellation material. First was generational trauma. In the first books of the Bible, they talk about that the generational trauma goes in 7 generations. So, and if we take that as a fact that Bible is word of God, kind of like that's true. It's already described there that people knew it like many thousand years ago, that the bad deeds of the father, it will have a ripple down effect. And what I understand now from modern psychology, it's kind of like a fact backed by government that we have generational traumas. And we don't have, like, of course, the official that it's 7 generations, but if you do family constellation, it's so clear to you that it could be 7 or even more. And also that honoring your parents part, it's like, I was thinking, like, what is that honoring part? That what does it mean, and why is it so in core of Christianity? And Jung helped me to understand that, and it comes from this model of human psyche. And I don't know, is it in English like Matushka doll, what you have in Russia? And it's like dolls inside the dolls. And the core, the smallest doll, the seed of your existence is your parents. And it ripples, goes up from there. And if you don't respect the core of who you are, then you will it will have the ripple negative effect on all of the layers of your being. And kind of like, no matter what or how you got life from your parents, you got it from there, and it has the imprint of God there. And your personal life is a picture of your parents. It's stamped there inside your, I would say, inside your soul even. And if you reject your parents, you will reject your own soul. So that's what I got from the Bible. I don't know, how does it that
Yeah,
sound?
no, that lands well in me. And I also, so that's, you said before, we talked about how do you work with some, if you have had like sort of traumatic experiences in your life. I've even seen constellations with someone who's been the victim of incest. That's like, it's terrible, right? However, what you need to do in order to resolve that is that you should develop, you should look at things from a non-judgmental position. It doesn't mean that you say, oh, incest is fine. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means that you say, this thing happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. And maybe also say, there is a reason why this happened. I don't know this reason, but it just happened. And I need to integrate it into my life. That this has happened to me, I need to integrate it rather than perpetuating my understanding of myself as a victim all the time. So just, and I think this is also what the Bible tells us, that yes, there are horrors in the world. But even in the face of the worst horrors, we can still find comfort in the fact that everything that happens is God's will. I mean, nothing. It is true that Satan is roaming around and doing all kinds of stuff, but he's not doing. He's like, Jesus is still the stronger one, so Satan can only do things that Jesus will allow, and then sometimes we can ask, why did he allow this, Jesus? We don't always understand it, but basically, I think what Jesus wants is, first of all, he wants us to be free. So he wants us to make our own mistakes, but he also wants us to grow, and grow in faith. And sometimes catastrophes or traumas or something can do that. And I think that's also, if you have like personal traumas, that's also the approach you should. There's so many people who just, they identify with their traumas. They're like, oh, I was a victim of this and that in my childhood. That's who I am. And then they keep repeating that pattern of victimization for their entire life, which means that they're unbearable to live with, because, yeah, it's not a good dynamic. And they're also unbearable to themselves because they don't have any agency, because they're just victims of outer forces. So what they need to do is to integrate the trauma. It doesn't mean that they say, oh, this was a really good thing, or it's, of course it's bad. Yes, but we should be able to kind of like integrate it into our lives, where we just accept it as it is. And I think, again, Jesus can help you do that.
And I think one part of that journey is you to, like you were sharing, that kids think that their parents are God, and maybe they don't think that their parents are God, but they act so, because it's kind of like when you have this developing psyche and you are just like a small child, it is like a God to you, your parents. And I think what in family constellation you do, you separate God from your parents, like kind of like God is bigger than your parents. Like whatever your parents did to you, it doesn't, in the final analysis, it doesn't matter, because God is bigger than your parents. And you have to, well, it's like in Jungian individuation process. Jung talks about you have two sets of parents. One are your earthly parents, and then you have a divine parents. And like first you grow up with your earthly parents, have a relationship with your father and mother, and deal with that. And when you are ready to go beyond that, then you will start to have a straight relationship with God, the Father, or the Mother of God, like the feminine aspect of God, and realize that your parents are just human beings. but it of course it's just the peeling of the layers of the onion. But I think it's an important part that when you do that, you kind of can do the separation. And if you stay in the relationship with your parents, you will never individuate, you will never grow up. That's in some part of family constellation journey, you need to let go of your parents completely and not look back ever again. And then you can have a relationship with the real God or the God the Father or this kind of stuff. So one thing we could dive in deeper is that what I see as one really big problem in Christianity, the most Christianity that I know, is that dealing with the problem of evil. And what you said there, that said that Satan cannot do anything that Christ don't approve. And then there would be a question that, well, why does Christ approve of pedophilia or sadism or this what's now in the big movie about the child sex trafficking? Why does evil exist?
Because the ultimate purpose of our life here on earth is not our life here on earth. There's a higher purpose. There's a purpose that reaches beyond this world, and which means that what we do here on earth, or what happens here on earth, will ultimately be judged from a point of view that is outside of this world. That's also why we say it's Jesus who will judge us. And he's not even, as debatable, you can kind of have different approaches about that. You can say he's not judging us in this life. He will only judge us afterwards. So he will judge us from, and from that point of view, you can kind of say, yes, in this life, this was evil. However, it had this evil deed or this evil event or this evil had these effects. It sort of did this and this and this to these other people. And then like one of them can be, if you experience like traumatic events in this world, they sometimes help people, or they are the things that kind of push people towards Jesus. It helps them to get salvation. And I think also in general, just like if there weren't any evil in the world, we could be tempted to think that we didn't need Jesus. If everything was just hunky-dory, we would just be like, oh, why would I need Jesus? Everything's perfect here. I don't need to pray for anything, or because, yeah. So I think, so it's also, it's the purpose of evil is to push us or nudge us into a position of humility, and not make us think that we don't need Jesus. So, and then of course there's victims of pedophilia, and that's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible, and some of them will die. That's also kind of some of the stories that are coming out. We're kind of seeing these horrors that are going on with children around the world. And I don't claim that I can understand that. I can't, or even take it in. To me, it's mostly something that's, I know it's going on, but I don't think I've integrated it into my life world. But then who knows what happens to these children when they die? Maybe they get a special place in heaven, or who knows, in eternity, and then things even out in a way.
So what do you think about this Jungian idea of integrating your inner shadow? And that Jung has this famous phrase that the roots of the shadow goes all the way up into the hell, and what Jordan Peterson famously says about that, that you have to realize your capability of evil. What do you think about that?
I think you and I think differently about this. I think, because I think so. To Jesus, we are all sinners. We're all sinners. Like nobody's perfect, and so we all sin. And so I think you should. That's definitely something you should take in, because only that's also a way of me being humble in relationships to other people, like saying I'm a sinner, so who am I to judge your sins? Like, and then we can have like a normal or healthy relationship. But there's nothing worse than being around people who think they're perfect themselves. They're unbearable. So that's one part of it. But then, of course, you can be a sinner without necessarily, I mean, doing something that's evil. Yes, in a way, I think you should. I don't know. Yes, you should entertain the thought that yes, maybe I could do evil, and then, but at the same time, I'm not sure you should identify with it. It's we had a discussion earlier about we wanted to do this this family constellation exercise, and I wanted to, because we were talking about how can you put Jesus into a constellation, and then you said, well, if we put Jesus in, we have to put Satan in there as well. And I've been thinking about that afterwards, and I'm not sure that's the case. You can do that, but I'm not sure I want to do that necessarily. I don't think you have to do that. Um, what was the question again? The question was integrating your own shadows and
Yeah, it's like
your own.
Well, it's for me when I like. Of course, I understand that there's like a thousand different ways of looking at the Bible and being a Christian. But what I don't see so much, that kind of like contemplating your own darkness. And what I have been doing for the last 5 years, really deeply I've been contemplating on my own darkness, that what makes me so good. Like, well, of course, like what you said, we are all sinners. That's kind of given for me as well. But also, I do think that there is some wisdom there, that understanding that also, and we have this holiness in ourselves, but we have also the evil inside ourselves all the time. And it's really, really useful to get to know that evil, because if you don't, it will play it tricks on you.
Yes, at the same time, I also think that the things that there's a phrase, pay attention to. So you pay your attention, you invest your attention in something, and whatever you pay your attention to grows. So, so I think yes, we should be aware of these things, and we should be, and we shouldn't be tempted to think, oh, I'm a person who can never do evil. No, we should sort of be prepared to feel into that. But I think we should also be careful about how much attention do you pay to this? How much do you focus on this? Because there's also like one way of like if you give attention to light in your life, then that automatically also makes the darkness, if not disappear, then become less. We can see this in. So I'm involved in like there's a lot of people right now, and many of the people I know who are like skeptical about Corona. So they're a little suspicious about what's going on in the world, right? And so, as you know, there's no end to, if you like find the right Telegram channels. There's no end to the stupidity and the evil that you can entertain yourself with. You can do it 24 hours a day, and you will not even cover everything that's there. So you can just like do. So what I think is, yes, you should look at some of these things. You should be aware that this is happening, but at the same time, don't give it all your attention. Don't give it too much attention. Turn to Jesus instead. Um, I have there's this podcast that I follow where he says this is it called Theology and Apologetics, and he's reading through the book of Revelation, and he says multiple times, he says, if you know more about Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Tony Fauci and Joe Biden than you know about Jesus, then your priorities are probably not right. You should turn towards Jesus more. So yes, you should be aware of the evil, but don't give it too much attention. And I think that that's also, there's a danger that you kind of identify too much with. I see that among some Christians, that it's like they sort of indulge in their own sinfulness. It's not to say that they indulge in sins, but they indulge in their own sins. They're like, oh, I'm the sinner, I'm so lazy, I blah blah. All they find all these errors in themselves. Where I'm like, ah, ah.
But I think there's one thing that kind of bothers me there is like when you said that you have to be careful where you give your attention to, pay your attention. But at the same time, I don't believe that we are the masters of our attention. That well, it's kind of course, this comes from Jung as well. That our attention is we in alchemy to talk about kind of this mercurial energy, that it goes somewhere like the famous Harry Potter references, that you follow the snitch, which goes somewhere. You can see the tail of that light, and your attention goes, I want to look at there, I want to look at there. And it's not like you can control where your attention goes. Like for me personally, I have learned to trust that wherever my attention goes is the right way for me personally.
Mhm.
And I have been looking really deeply in the darkness, and I would say that I'm way, way more clear and stronger human being because of that.
Mhm.
And it's not like that I'm paying attention to Satan inside myself. I am doing that as well, but like what Jordan Peterson said, there's like Lex Friedman asked him about this Nietzschean looking at the abyss type of a deal. That if you look at too long, you look at the abyss starts looking back at you. Kind of what you were saying, that it will like have an effect on you. But Jordan Peterson says like keep on looking, because there will be light in end of the tunnel. And I think that's what I kind of feel, that Christ is there behind that darkness if I look long enough.
Okay, so I think I also think that our paths in life and walking with Jesus even are different. Different people need different things. And when I look at someone like Jordan Peterson, I'm like, what he does, it doesn't work for me. It's too, he's too, yeah, he does what he does. And yeah, but it doesn't, there's too much focus on the darkness or the you can even hear it when he speaks, and he doesn't have a good sense of humor either. He's like, it's like, and I'm not sure I'm not sure he believes in God really. He's like, or I don't know. I'm gonna go out on a limb here, or I don't think John Peterson, he's not gonna listen to this anyway. So
You never know. You never know.
who knows? Dear Jordan, please. No, it's like as if he has a heart. He doesn't want to move into a position where God is bigger than Jordan Peterson. He doesn't want to surrender to God. I remember he said when someone asked him whether he believed in God, and then he says, I act as if God exists. What kind of a bullshit answer is that? Why just say yes or no? And that's a no. Then you don't believe in God. If you do believe in God, you just say yes. It's easy if you believe.
I would say that's way more complicated.
That's what he says all the time. That's his. It's he also. Oh, that is so complicated. I remember I saw him in Copenhagen. I've seen him twice, and the second time was terrible. I have to say. He would sit on this podium with his wife, and then the whole thing. Oh, now we're gonna just do Q&As. So we'll take questions from the audience. I think he took 3 questions because he had to provide these long answers. Like, because, oh, it's so complicated, blah, blah, blah. And that's, I think, yes, if you don't believe in Jesus, things become very complicated. But if you do believe in Jesus, then a lot of things do actually become less complicated and very simple.
Is it like a necessary thing that things are simple or less complicated? What's the
No. If
insane
you want complications in your life, and I think he has plenty, and I think he wants that, so that's fine for him. That's so I'm not judging that, but I just in my life, or it's not that, but it's just my experience in my own life, and that's what works for me, is that there are just things that have become less complicated, and I like that. Like, and to go back to this, I don't know, like Corona, I don't have to understand all the mechanics of the workings of the Illuminati or the Federal Reserve or the ECB or the Freemasons or the government, all that. I don't have to understand it in all. I don't. You can go into where it becomes very complicated. I don't need to go there. Yeah, the assholes, fine, but Jesus takes care of it.
But I think that's the thing there, that you can take that route, and we all have our different like paths where you go. But if you are working with complicated things, then life is complicated. Like if you are working because there are people who need to work on complicated things. Like, let's say, I don't know, probably you don't like Elon Musk, but I do.
Well, it's mixed.
And he does like the most complicated things that there is. And I think they are doing good for our human race. But then it's kind of like, if I'm with my wife, I'd rather have it less complicated. Like there's love and respect between us, and everything flows from there. That's perfect. But now I'm creating my own training for men using archetypes, family constellations. I have to deal with the marketing and the structure, and taking the people in, and hold that I want to be true to Jung and Hellinger at the same time. And maybe I'm a little bit too over ambitious with my plannings, but it's fucking complicated. So many levels at the same time. And I understand that if I want to do it, then I have to deal with the complicated, and I will do it with my mind. But then I think the thing is that you have to switch somewhere away from the complicated to be with other people as well. And I don't know what Jordan does. Well, he likes to dance with her wife. Maybe that's not complicated.
I hope so.
But of course, I think it's like a little bit
It's all,
As to why we were talking about Jordan Peterson, he's like somewhere else.
yeah.
We don't know what are his.
So the only thing, and I'm not judging him, I'm just saying it's because you brought him in as like a reference, and he doesn't. I don't follow him anymore. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't do anything for me anymore. He did something at one point, but he doesn't do anything for me anymore.
Yeah,
which is fine.
So can we come a little bit back from our adventures into theology and Christianity and family constellations back to money?
Yes.
Everybody wants more money. Almost everybody wants more.
No.
Okay.
No, a lot of people, most people actually, a lot of people don't want money. They think they want money. And if you ask them, they will say they want money, but deep down they don't.
And why is that?
Because they are afraid of taking from their mother. They would rather be bigger than their mother, and then they can't take from their mother, which means that they can't take money either. Period.
How can they fix that?
We can do, should we do a live constellation?
I think that would be a perfect place to end this podcast. Are we going to do a family constellation meditation?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's going to be too complicated if we have like.
Yeah.
So, and I will say this is also a little bit of an experiment because I'm not used to. I think I've done it a couple of times, but I'm not used to doing these meditation things. But let's see if it works, and if some of you makes money out of this constellation.
20%.
Yeah, I think 20%, and then we will share it between us, 10% each, me and Viljami. Oh, yeah, okay, so I know this is very. I have to go pee.
You will.
I think okay. Here's what's gonna happen. We're not gonna edit this. I'm just gonna go pee, and in the meantime, you can the listeners, you can sit quietly. I'll go so far away so the microphone doesn't pick up my peeing, and then I would advise you to maybe you can do one of your body.
Yeah, I can start with.
So you can warm them up, and then I enter the picture all fresh, and then we'll do the. Yeah, so you just go do that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. And you should find a comfortable place for yourself. It can be laying down, sitting down, whatever works for you personally. And when you find that place, you can close your eyes for a minute or two and try to bring your attention from your head down to your body. First, you can feel the sensations in your limbs, and maybe you can focus on the parts of your body which are touching something. And you can feel the Earth's gravitation pulling you down. And you can say yes to that pulling down movement, like you will relax. Something is pulling you down. And maybe you can breathe out and say, yes, I will let the gravity pull me down. And you can also sense that you are not going through the mattress or or wherever you are not going through, but something from the earth comes and backs you up. You can relax and trust the ground. And when you are there, just pay attention to your body and your breathing and see what happens when Ule starts to paint some pictures in your mind's eye. And if you feel uncomfortable or whatever, you can just open up your eyes and come back to the real life.
So now I invite you, with your eyes closed, to open up a visual space in front of you. In that space, I invite you to imagine that there is an object in front of you. The object can have any size, any shape, and any color that comes to you. Just let it come to you in whatever shape or form it may have. Just see it right there in front of you. And make sure that it has the right distance from you. If it feels good that it's far away, then it can be far away. If it feels good that it's close, then it's close. But just allow it to be in its proper place. And now I invite you, as you look at this object, I invite you to say these sentences. And you can say them out loud, or you can just repeat them in your head after me. You are my money. You are my money. Just for me. And as you say these words, just whatever emotions come up in you, just welcome them. Just allow them to flow through you. And if nothing comes, that's also fine. Now you can say, you have been here for me all the time. Now I'm looking at you. It's about time. And now I invite you to imagine that behind this object representing money, there's a bigger object, or perhaps rather a person, standing behind this object. It's bigger than you, and it's bigger than money. And I invite you to feel into what difference it makes, this person comes into the picture. And then you say this sentence directed at the person. Now I see where it's coming from. And I see that it's for me. Specifically for me. I need it. And I need it from you. And now I invite you, you can do this movement with your body, actually, or you can imagine yourself doing this. But I invite you to bow your head towards this person that's bigger than you. Just bow your head a little bit forward. See how that feels. And you can continue the movement as far as you like, either in real or just in this image. Maybe you want to go all the way to the floor and sit on your knees. Like a child. With its hands open. Reaching forward in the position of receiving. And you can say, I am small and you are big. And I take it from you with love and with gratitude. And I let it flow through me, trusting that when I need more, I can come back to you and get more. I need a lot. Because I have a life to live. My dear life, that you gave me. And now you raise up again, and you look at the figure, and from your heart, you end the meditation by saying, yes. And then I invite you to do this movement also, and I invite you to do it in real life. You put forward your hands, and then you take both of your hands slowly, move them towards your heart, taking in everything that has opened up in this constellation. You take it in, and slowly you take it into your heart. And trust that from there it's gonna move out through your body and into your life. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes again and come back to the podcast.
This was Mind of a Man podcast and the New Money podcast, doing a collaboration.
Yes.
And thank you, Ole.
Thank you for having me. Kiitos.
Kiitos. Tack.